So
exactly. And I actually don't disagree. It's just the way. So yeah, we can talk about that.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Let's get started. So Daniel, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Doing well. Looking forward to getting into some stuff.
Yeah, man, me too, definitely. I've been following you for a while and I'm a big fan of all your work. So I'm looking forward to the chat. Do you want to give us the 1 minute elevator pitch as to who you are and what you're doing?
Yeah. So as a young kid, played a lot of sports, got pretty obsessed with basketball when I was about 12 years old, started jump training at 13, dunking on a low rim in the driveway and then squatting with some old weights that I had in my basement bedroom, and had a lot of success as a teenager, gained probably a foot of my vertical in a year, dunked in 8th grade, got hooked on the process of jump training, started, Googling, looking stuff up, whatever, kept trying to train myself, ended up as known as like a guy who could jump high in high school. At 15 was when I decided I wanted to make a career out of it. So it was pretty early on. So I went on to, get an exercise science degree, started training people in college, and it just kind of snowballed into YouTube channel, website, Instagram, this jump science brand. And then in 2014, I moved to Austin, Texas, where I found a job at a speed training facility, or they're known for speed. So that's given me a chance to not only keep doing the jump stuff, but to get into the speed realm as well and get a lot of experience there working with athletes who are more focused on that. A lot of speed and jump training background at this point, and a lot of try to be like a science-based approach to that and understanding why things happen as well as I can, and using that information to try to solve the puzzle for people going forward. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, is that why you have that new Instagram account then, Speed Science? You're kind of nudging it a bit more.
That was just I got the sense that I had people who were more interested in jump stuff and then people who are more interested in speed stuff. And so I just said, let's put them in two different places so we don't alienate the followers, with when you go on a 6 posts about low heel recovery and sprinting, I don't know if my volleyball player followers are interested in that. So just a way to, target the content for people better.
You probably get a lot of coaches or people like me, looking at your content, but then you do get tons of obviously just athletes then who are trying to figure some stuff out for themselves and using your program. So
yes,
if it was just coaches, you can put it all into one place probably, because they are just going to be interested in your thoughts on all different types of training. But then athletes, I suppose, are looking for more specific.
Yeah, especially like the dunk community.
Yeah.
I think about them, it's like they really just want to see how to jump higher. They want to see people get strong and dunk and all this stuff. And then you start talking about the intricacies of speed technique and stuff, and it's just like I don't think they're real interested in that. So yeah. Well, some of them with like a track background maybe, but yeah.
There's I didn't realize this. There's such a hunger among those athletes, like the dunkers and the basketballers, for jump training isn't a big thing in Ireland because basketball isn't a big thing. And if I go to Gaelic football or hurling or soccer or rugby, I could benefit from jumping higher. But it's not me at the court, where my friend can dunk and I can't. And I'm I have to get I dunk. So there's jumping wasn't a big part of my development at all. It's just outside of the sport, and doing some box jumps and stuff in the gym.
Right.
We missed something there.
But yeah, you don't have that that jumping dream, this goal you're trying to reach. Yeah.
No.
Yep.
I think we missed that, that part of the plyometric development and athletic development, actually jumping, is a big deal. I think. Was there anything you found when you were younger like that, when you put on that foot on your vertical or whatever? What were you doing at that stage?
I was doing squats and calf raises 5 days a week, and then just dunking in the driveway. Then I had another spurt of success when I was 15, and that was squats, calf raises, and then like jump squats, jumping up my stairs, things like that. Looking back, if I had the knowledge that I have now, I would definitely have been sprinting a lot more. And I just being in basketball and not really other organized sports, I wasn't really getting speed feedback. And so like on the tail end of that big increase in vertical that I had when I was, 13 to 14 years old, on the tail end of that, I had actually gotten slower relative to my my soccer playing teammates. Yeah. So, we were all obviously growing, changing bodies a lot at that time. And I was jumping way higher, but they got a lot faster than I did at that time. I remember losing in a race to them where I used to be, pretty much even. And then I was like, oh, maybe I, maybe I need to run more. But then, yeah, just once I got to high school, all I did was play basketball. So it was never really an issue. I mean, I was always one of the fastest basketball players out there. So it wasn't really highlighted. But yeah, looking back, I would definitely do a lot more speed focused stuff.
Was that, do you think you got slower relative to them just because you weren't actually sprinting? Or do you think like there was some of your jump training was getting in the way? I presume it was that you weren't sprinting.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure. I mean, definitely from not sprinting, but also, I mean, squatting 5 days a week will do something to you. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I got slower overall. I just got less fast than they did. But yeah, it's hard to say exactly the impact there.
Why would you put in more sprinting now? If you are, would you do that if you were working with someone whose just goal was to just dunk? Would you put in some sprinting in their training?
I would definitely use some, yes. Because I think there is there's a physical quality that you develop from sprinting because it's fast off the ground. That's what I typically call elasticity. And what I've learned is that is one, I mean, it can enhance your jumping. Two, it's not developed by just like any explosive training or like any plyometric you want to pick. You really need volume of foot contacts that are fast off the ground to get it. What taught me that was my experience with track athletes. We're coming off of kind of the being familiar with the basketball athlete and jump training and looking at people who can jump, and then seeing, oh, this track athlete actually doesn't jump spectacularly, but he can run way faster than me. And it's like, where, how's he doing that? Because he's not stronger. He's not, doesn't jump spectacularly. Like he just floats over the ground really easily. Like what is that? How do we get that? So yeah, that's what kind of taught me that lesson. But then also you see, okay, the guy who can run well, but then also you see him take off of one leg for a jump, and it's like, oh shoot. Like they actually, there's some talent there too, even though that's not their thing. Like jumping's not even their main thing, but they have this ability to just, pop off the ground really easily. And that can translate into like, oh, that dude just threw down a dunk on a breakaway unexpectedly, like I didn't even think he was much of an athlete, but wow. So there's nothing that can compare to, well, you just can't train those qualities that you get in sprinting anywhere else, I don't think. It's very, very unique. Which is why you should probably try and, as you get older, keep sprinting if you can. Yes. Because once you lose it, it's hard to get back. I agree with that entirely.
What are the, when you think about like the jump science system, if you call it that, what are like the key principles that you would that just make up that system, I suppose, and your philosophy on training?
Yeah, so there's a few of them. I mean, the first one is just your specificity principle of you got to do the thing. So if you're trying to dunk, you got to go out there and try to dunk, or you got to go dunk on a low rim, but you got to go and do it. Don't don't first seek for like a program or exercises. The first thing you have to do is the thing, and build up a history of doing it. And so that's really the first principle is, yeah, don't think training first. Think go do the activity first. Then when it comes to what you add on to that, then that's where I'm looking at. I promote kind of fundamental things like mobility and strength relative to body weight. And if you have a jumping background or whatever activity background, and then you have mobility and strength to body weight ratio, that's a big part of the equation right there. That's probably 90% of it right there. Then from there, it's adding in some of those more subtle physical qualities, more subtle meaning, okay, so not just strength relative to body weight, but now it's the elasticity piece. Okay, so if you're a 2-foot jumper and that's kind of your background, let's add some sprinting in to get that lightness on the feet. If you're a sprinter and that's your background, let's add some plyometrics, some large impulse jumps to develop that muscular power section better. So yeah, kind of filling in athletic gaps there, along with the relative strength. And then sort of the other theme of my career has been, we do run into these difficulties with getting strength to translate to explosive movements, and we got to find ways to manage that. We have this camp of people that, sort of like the conjugate method, right? Where it's just, okay, just train everything all the time, get better at all of it all together, and that's the solution, and it's like, yeah, that it works well until it doesn't, right? There's cases where it doesn't work, or there's cases where it works for a while and then it starts to, the result starts to start to fade away, and you have to find solutions in that department. So that's where you'll see me talking about taking breaks from strength training, or modifying your strength training to make sure that it's not being disruptive to your athletic pursuits. I've used the phrase like maximize how athletic you can be at a given strength level. So yeah, you'll see me talking about that concept. And that's a big one, and it's very much, it's artistic more than scientific. It's a lot of taking data and seeing how it changes over time, and then just responding accordingly. You don't really assume every person is going to follow the formula. Looking for solutions as you go there. And then one more principle I would say is rest. I'm big on that. I think the way that most people train and combine that with playing their sport, a lot of them are in a situation where if you just do that indefinitely for months on end, you end up in a situation where you will benefit from rest. Now, if you are, just starting out, or, maybe you don't play a sport and you're just starting out with like 2 workouts a week, then that you might be able to sustain for months on end and not really need rest. But the way most people are training is not necessarily sustainable over time, as far as the stress on your body versus your recovery. Normally the stress is out in front of the recovery, and rest is going to be helpful.
When you think about rest, do you think, I know rest very much depends, like obviously on what they're doing and who they are and all that stuff, but do you think about like, okay, you've been training 5 days a week, 6 days a week, or lifting, whatever you're doing, you just need an extra day's rest? Or is there cases then where you just say you just need to take like 2 weeks off and not do any of this stuff at all?
I don't usually recommend the full rest, just because there is going to be some level of detraining that happens. So it's more like, okay, we need an easy week, or maybe we need an easy 2 weeks, or even an easy month. So I'm more of the, okay, let's do 2 short workouts per week for the next 2 weeks, like that type of thing, rather than hey, I'll see you in a month, although there definitely have been cases of, oh yeah, 10-day trip to an island somewhere, come back, I'm expecting, they're going to be out of shape, a little detrained, maybe something's going to be hurting. Oh no, they're performing spectacularly. Okay. That works too. Or even, I've had people tell me like, I was out for like 6 weeks with an injury. All I did was a little bit of rehab, and then I came back and I was just faster than I used to be. There are cases like that where it's a little more extreme than you expect to be effective immediately, but then it just works out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's a dangerous space to be in though, because that can lead someone to think that I'm just better without doing this training.
Yes.
Some people
Right.
think that, but I think I had this conversation maybe with Kier on his podcast actually, where he was talking about like some of the GOTA stuff, and people are doing these funny drills and stuff, and they feel better. We kind of summed it out that like maybe they feel better just because they're just not doing the lifting for a little while.
Yeah, right.
It just took their body away rather than these drills. Now maybe not, fair enough, but 6 months later, like they still have that strength, they still have that 5 years of strength training in their system that's looking after them. But 6 months later, maybe that's leaving their body a little bit, they're detraining, and they're more susceptible to injury now. And
right, they're just doing they're just doing pinky toe drags and and expecting to be fast and bulletproof or whatever.
a lot of these systems are piggybacking off the back of someone who did like fairly good quality strength training for several years and then decided, I don't like this anymore, I'm going to back off here. And like, that's actually not a bad idea to back off it, but it's the other stuff that you're doing is helping you.
Yes.
So,
that comes up with the squat depth debate that makes me think of, where people talk about, I was doing full squats and I switched to quarter squats, and then this good thing happened, and I was like, yeah, because you took a little break from full squatting. I'm not surprised. Like, quarter squats probably just aren't really affecting you that much, and you're just getting you're reducing the stress on your body, so that produce some performance enhancement. That's my opinion of it. Hard to prove that one way or another, but
you're definitely a fan of full depth squatting, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes. And usually a back squat, I think.
Yes.
And your squat looks pretty good, I think.
If you say so. Sometimes it does.
Yeah. But you do a good bit of heels elevated work, do you?
Yes. I personally actually don't need heels elevated because I have pretty significant ankle mobility. I do heel elevation because I would like to lose some ankle mobility. I would like to, and the reason I say that is because the elastic athletes, the like gifted top speed athletes that I've worked with, they all have relatively immobile ankles. Not extremely immobile, but none of them are putting their knee 5 inches in front of their toes with their heel on the ground, and so I'm just curious about the prospect of it. Can I possibly reverse from where I am? And if I, just sprint and do plyos a bunch and I don't do deep dorsiflexion, can I lose some ankle mobility? And what would the influence of that be? So that's just a personal experience or experiment on myself.
That's interesting. For me, when I improved my dorsiflexion, I felt like I got slower. Now, I also, in fairness, like we were saying earlier, I also wasn't sprinting as much at the time, but so like that's definitely part of it, but I definitely felt like something changed at my ankle when I improved my dorsiflexion. So look, I think it's very individual. It's probably impossible to prove, but I'm not a big fan of constantly, like, people who already have really good dorsiflexion, like constantly doing the deepest knees over toes work that they can find and pulling on pulling on their Achilles. I do think there could be some negative effects associated with it. I just can't prove it.
Yeah, hard thing to to prove one way or the other. Yeah, I mean, if you took a research group and like just improved all their ankle mobility, would there be a negative impact on performance? No. Not like across the group, no.
Yeah.
But there might be some individuals in there that were affected by it.
Yeah. But then they might, like, some of them, their knees might feel a bit better because they have more dorsiflexion and stuff. So that's kind of health and performance continuum that you're going to struggle with. Do you think, how long have you been doing this like heels elevated thing to reduce ankle mobility? And do you think it has worked?
It's been a couple years maybe.
Yeah.
And I haven't done it probably thoroughly enough, because there'll still be times where I just don't have anything to elevate my heels on that's immediately available, and then I'll just do, squat without it. Yeah, I also I still do calf raises, so it's like I'm probably not doing extreme enough of a job. I don't go deep on the seated calf raise, but yeah, I haven't made any significant transformation. There has been some moments though where I'll try an overhead squat in bare feet, and I'll be like, you know what? I think that's a little different than it used to be.
I'm a bit worse here.
But it's right, and that's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I haven't. You're the first person I've seen say that in a long time. I thought I was the only other person that maybe thought about that. But you probably have had that good range for a long time. I went from having really shit range to really good ankle dorsiflexion range in a shorter amount of time, and I felt like it did help me. It did help my knees and stuff, but it felt like I got a bit slower.
Sure.
I do. So in Tim's podcast, I spoke to him about he mentioned the hip and knee dominant stuff that I think he said he got it from you, and you hear a lot of people talking about like hip versus knee dominance. Can you actually said to me, Tim didn't do a great job of backing himself up there. Can you give us like kind of your thoughts around that, how you classify athletes into either one of those, and whatever your thoughts are there?
Yeah, so basically it's just, when we look at a strength exercise like a squat or a split squat, does the person naturally move into a position that puts more load on the knees or more load on the hips? And I would say more load on the knees is actually probably extremely rare. It's more like if they're pretty balanced out, then I would call that knee dominant.
Yeah.
And then if you're, maybe the hips are like maybe a little bit more loaded than the knees, I would call that like balanced, or, maybe that's kind of like the theoretical ideal.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, on a squat, you're looking at the bar path, and if it moves, basically directly over top of the knee joint, in the bottom portion of the lift, or like in the hard part of the lift, then that is, that means the bar has a lot more of a moment arm at the hips, and it has minimal moment arm at the knee. So there's a lot more resistance torque at the hips. So that's why I call that hip dominant.
Yeah. So it looks a little bit like a good morning.
I mean, maybe a little bit, but it's not necessarily a bad squat. This is one of the things that came to mind when I heard your conversation with Tim, was a hip dominant squat doesn't necessarily always look bad. It could look great, but if you look at the bar path on the side, it's just obvious the barbell is putting more resistance at the hips.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it doesn't have to be an ugly squat.
Yeah.
It's just a different bar path.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so knee dominant, really, I would say your typical good squatter who stays upright well, they might be just balanced. So it's just a good theoretical ideal. Knee dominant, I would say I've really only seen in teenage males who they've grown, or maybe it's not growth related, but for whatever reason they're just really tight in the glutes or the hips in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're very undeveloped in the glutes, and they don't have good range of motion, and so when they squat they tend to put at least as much load on the knees as they do on the hips.
Yeah.
Or, visibly what looks that way, I should say. I mean, I'm not in a biomechanics lab measuring things,
yeah, just a eyeball.
So that like actually knee dominant, I would say is pretty rare.
Yeah.
But there are, that person will look like a good squatter, but they will have, I would say, some kind of unexpected lacks or unexpected gaps in their performance that you wouldn't expect from somebody who they look like a good athlete, they squat well, but then it's like, okay, well, their first couple steps of acceleration are super slow.
Okay.
They can't get out of a crouch stance very well at all. And their broad jump is like, they have, let's say a 30-inch vertical, they have a less than 8-foot broad jump, like they just can't project horizontally.
Okay. So anything that involves like that more aggressive hip extension, you think those people would struggle with that?
Yeah, the extreme knee dominant. That's what I've seen. Yeah. And they're also, I would say I've seen even in just kind of the naturally good squatter who's not necessarily got a problem at the hips, but they just maybe naturally strong at the quads.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that I've seen go, like locked out knee during the first couple steps of acceleration.
Okay.
So I know you talk about that delaying knee extension.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so again, as your conversation with Tim, and you were talking about delaying knee extension and the squat pattern. And for me, what I've seen is the naturally good squatter is strong at the quads, and they're the ones that are too much knee focused in a sprint in the acceleration. So it's not necessarily
too much knee extension.
Yeah, or like early knee extension.
Early knee extension, yeah.
Yeah.
And sorry, I get this right now. So they're the people who we're saying, like, look, the squat is more vertical displacement, it's more up and down.
Right. Yeah, whereas I've seen plenty of, hip dominant, kind of more bent over squatters they could be great first few steps of acceleration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I'll have to kind of have a look at it a bit closer and see that where it kind of carries over. I suppose the athletes who are squatting and they're using their hips more, like they're in more of an extension pattern. They probably are already a sprinter. You know what I mean? Like a lot of them are sprinters. Like they're not locked into extension, but they love extension. They're powerful athletes there, and that's what we're seeing there. So I guess that's where your point of contention with that maybe was, where they are delaying knee extension because they're getting their hip extension, and that isn't just me talking to myself now and talking.
Right.
Just trying to get it right in my own head of what you're seeing. So what would a session look like? Maybe like this is just off the cuff. Like, what would a session, if you were trying to get so I won't say a knee dominant athlete to kind of train the hips a bit more. Well, you can if you want, but you're saying you don't see as many of those type of athletes then, right? So what would a session then that's more of a hip dominant athlete to start to load the knees more, like, or is there example exercises, and not just strength wise, maybe it is now, but could it be like that there is some mobility deficits there that actually they can't get the knees forward, not just because of strong quads, but like the ankles and stuff like that is one. And then 2, strength exercises that you might choose, and 3, is there plyometric variations then you might choose to actually load them a bit more?
Yeah, so one, I would say the mobility factor, I do elevate the heels to try to take that out, so that's not the limiting factor, so that we can just we can get that knee forward right away without having to work on ankle mobility a bunch. So yeah, I wouldn't say I go to the mobility direction, although I guess if we want to talk about pronation things, I do barefoot warm-ups, and I look at the feet, and I might have people do like inward and outward rolling of the feet, things like that. So, but yeah, not necessarily trying to increase dorsiflexion range a bunch.
Yeah.
But then in the strength department, it will be, okay, yeah, let's do the best squat we can, and let's coach it up well. And that might, depending on the level of the athlete, it might be just like start with a goblet squat instead. But the issue with the goblet squat is, the load is usually forward. And the forward load then is not loading your quads more.
Yeah.
We want to keep the load back. So I go to the back squat and then try to hit an upright back squat. And again, it's about the bar path. It's not so much just, oh, do they look upright? It's where is the bar located? That's assuming you have a decent amount of weight. I mean, if it's just an empty bar, then that's not necessarily the key factor in where you're loading. But yeah, so trying to go to a back squat as well as we can. And then, yeah, usually, obviously, with the hip dominant athlete, they're not probably getting as much quad development from the squat as you want. So then I go to things like a pistol squat, where even when you allow all the manipulations, like hands forward, foot forward, bent over, like it's still a quad exercise when you're on one leg, and that's heel elevated as well. Yeah. I'll do a knees forward split squat. And that one, since you have 2 points of contact on the ground, you can take that front heel off the ground and just be on the ball of your foot, and intentionally pushing the knee forward. And then like the sissy squat type of movement, with knees forward, bodies bending backward. And then I guess those are probably the go-to strength ones. I've definitely kind of come up with others at times, but some form of those type of exercises. And then I do try to get the plyometric or the athletic realm. So it's we're not just developing slow strength here, but we're getting some fast loading too. And for that, I would say any kind of hopping variation is one that I go to, because that's one that I've noticed where the people with the strong quads, they do great on those. Yeah. I think when you're on one leg, the knee is really the weak point. Yeah. And so it kind of highlights the need for quad strength. So any kind of variation, hopping on one leg. I will do, hops where you're pulling your foot up, so you have to get off the ground higher. I'll do hops for distance, or maybe maximize, like max distance on one leg. Hopping is a pretty hard exercise. So I might do okay, let's get to 80%, 90% of what we could do, but then stay a little more rhythmic and bouncy, as opposed to just it can get really ugly when you start going for max distance.
Yeah, there's a lot of breaking forces obviously then as well. And then so if you're trying to load the knee then a little more on the quads and then variations, are you thinking, okay, I'm not going to be too hard on them, saying I need you to get off the ground quicker or be stiffer or more reactive or anything like that, because then you're going to load the ankle more? Are you happy for them to maybe spend just that tiny bit longer on the floor?
I wouldn't say I'm happy with it. No, I still go for the quickness. Because I haven't seen really a separation between getting quick off the ground and then having the quad ability. Yeah. I think the quickness does require, and it may not seem like it because you're maybe not bending your knee as much. Yeah. But I think you're still training the quad. Yeah. The recoil there. Yeah. Even when you are trying to be fast off the ground. Yeah. So now I do I'll do a single leg standing vertical, which is really going to be probably a hip driven movement, but then the landing back on one leg. Okay. Yeah. That's quad, and that's not, it's not quick. I do decelerations, which are a lot of quad. And then, even just some other landing type work. Yeah. Where we're trying to hit the quad, but we're hitting it fast instead of with a bunch of weight.
Yeah. The hopping,
yeah, I guess.
The hopping, I suppose, is if it's good, it's good. It doesn't need to be slower and like more deeper joint angles. If it looks good, it looks good. And then good means you're working all the muscles that you need to work and all the tendons or whatever that you need to work. Yeah, I was kind of like in the rehab process, if I have a knee client and I feel like there's weakness in the quads and they're maybe keeping that leg a bit stiffer, like a poker, they're trying to not actually load into the knee, then I will go into like them deeper joint ranges in their kind of jumping type work. So like skater hops and stuff like that, I'm not saying like be stiff, like I'm actually saying don't be afraid to sink into the movement and load all these deeper joint angles. But that would probably come after I do like loads of pogos and stuff like that, where I can get some kind of plyometric stimulus into their body, but it's a more ankle driven movement where they're not going to actually be, they're not afraid to do that yet, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. I would say, the skater jumps is another one that I do use. I guess I don't think of it as like the knee loading, but it is a great example of that. Bounding too, which is really in the same realm as hopping. But again, it's that same pattern where it's, I see the people who are strong at the knee and have good balance in their legs, they get off the ground fast on bounding. So then, I want to see that from those hip dominant athletes as well, like try to develop it. And then, lunge jumps is another one, like lunge jumps or squat jumps, where that is getting to that deeper knee bending, but with faster loading. Those are all in the toolbox.
Yeah, man. And did you? I just did a podcast with Matt McInnes Watson. He's he's from Plus Plyos. He's not as much big into like SSE world, just all like plyometrics, and he was a track athlete, and he like everyone else really, I suppose. He just has his tiers of different movements, and he has a deep tier where like you just go through all them deep joint ranges. And I didn't know about it until we had the podcast, and I was looking at his Instagram beforehand. But I really like that. I really like that stuff. I really, really like it. I think you probably are using a lot of that stuff, and just it's an important. It's easy to forget about that stuff. Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's actually really influential, even just on strength. Particularly for relatively untrained people. I mean, you get some major lower body soreness from lunge jumps, and I've had plenty of kids who, did 2 or 3 sets at the end of their workout and then saw me the next time like, yo, my glutes or my quads, like, what did you do to me? And I was like, yeah, that's lunge jumps for you. Or I think also in the strength maintenance realm, if you are getting away from weights with an advanced athlete, you can maintain a lot with that type of movement.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And that's something I wanted to ask you about, is like you had a post about the faster eccentrics, and I'll leave you explain what you were saying, but maybe in them deeper ranges of motion, like that's like a lunge jump. I'm actually getting some of my fast eccentric there as well. So can you explain what you were saying in your Instagram post? Basically, you were saying everything shouldn't be slow eccentrics, right?
Yeah, so there's I've done a number of posts on this, so it's hard. I don't know exactly which one you're referring to, but
I think it was one of the first ones, just in general, like the broad concept here of why we should be thinking about actually like using momentum and loading faster in strength training.
Yeah, so it was basically trying to I was seeing this narrative of trying to train eccentric strength, and people were doing slow eccentric strength training with usually that it was done with like lighter weights, like 50-60%, something like that, and talking about these are eccentric split squats, or we're trying to work on eccentric strength. And the key thing to understand is that stopping the weight and reversing it is actually where we get the strongest stimulus in strength training. on your muscles, like the strongest structural stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
And stopping something that's moving fast is a lot harder than stopping something that's moving slow. And yeah, I mean, we could put that in physics terms like momentum and impulse and peak force or whatever if you want to, but it's just, I mean, you can really just go common sense. It's easier to stop it if it's moving slow than if it's moving fast. So while going slow is actually, it's a way to be more gentle on your muscles when you stop the weight and turn it around.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be good. Like you might want to do that at times. Especially, yeah, like introducing an exercise if you're trying to, not just go as violent as possible right away, you know, like if you're starting a training program, or to learn the movement, you want to make sure you have good control. Like, yeah, you know, that makes sense. It's not a bad thing, but it's actually not how you're going to get eccentric strength. Yeah. Eccentric strength is going to come from you are trying as hard as you can, and the load is overcoming you and it's forcing your muscles to lengthen. That's how I define eccentric overload, is where, the load is forcing your muscles to lengthen and you can't stop it. And so you get that, you can do that with super maximal loads, right? You can put 120% of your max on the bar and then just take it as slow as you can on the way down, but you just physically can't stop it. Or you can use momentum. You can go down, even, it doesn't even have to be fast. It's just natural speed. You go down, the weight has some momentum. Then when you start to stop it, it's going to force your muscles to lengthen further before you actually do. And it's in that period where they're being forced to lengthen that you're getting the strongest stimulus on your muscles.
Yeah.
And so that was my thing, is basically like, this is actually how you're going to get eccentric strength, is with, you know, natural speed lifting, or even you can do, if you have a good lifter who's got good control, you can do intentionally fast drops.
Yeah.
And that's actually like a really powerful stimulus. And you can get a lot out of, one, not that much weight, and two, you can get out a lot out of not that many reps when you do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that applies to strength training. It also does apply to the plyometric realm. Like even body weight, like we're talking about on those lunge jumps, even body weight, when you're dropping from, let's say, a lunge jump, if you're a decent athlete, might be like 60 centimeters in the air, you're dropping from that straight into a deep lunge position and then reversing. It's actually like a really powerful stimulus there. And then even your sort of more classical plyometrics, where you're faster off the ground, you know, you have a bunch of momentum, you're hitting the ground and reversing fast. You are taking advantage of that momentum-based loading, particularly in the quads and the calves. So you're getting some of that stimulus there. So yeah, I mean, if let's say you play a field sport or something, and that's all you do for a few months, and then you go and you hit 3 sets of 10 like rhythmic jumps fast off the ground as high as you can, you know, it'll tear your calves up.
Yeah. You
know, you can get extremely sore from that, because it's a stimulus that's way more intense than what you're accustomed to. So yeah, that's the slow versus fast eccentrics topic. Yeah,
I think that's an important topic, and people understand this when it comes to Nordics, because they're say you're doing Nordics for the first time. That is eccentric, because that's a super maximal load there, because people can't stop themselves in the Nordic, right? But when I get strong enough to actually have an eccentric and a concentric, then my eccentric and my Nordic should be let myself fall and catch myself at the bottom right before I hit the ground, right?
Yes, you're going to create that overload even though you don't have the super maximal weight.
Yes, so there's what you're saying about the two ways to do that. So in the squat, then my option there is load up 120% of the bar and try and go slow as I can going down, but then I have to obviously unload the bar at the bottom, or I just have less weight, but I just drop and have to catch at the bottom and reverse it, right?
Do that with 70%. Yeah,
cool. That helps clear it up in my mind as well. Definitely does. It's not something that's talked about very much for some reason, actually, now that you mention it. But the Nordic thing, it does make sense to people. Like, that is eccentric because I actually not strong enough to stop myself.
Right. But yeah, I mean, with momentum, you're actually not strong enough to stop yourself right away. You do eventually.
Yeah.
And another thing I would mention here is flywheel training. And there's tons of evidence for it being really effective and at a lot of different things. And that is the same concept. It's momentum-based loading. The flywheel isn't that heavy. It's not more than your max squat. But you get it moving really fast to the point where you can't stop it right away when you're sinking into that squat or whatever movement you're doing. That momentum forces your muscles to lengthen, and that's eccentric overload, and that's a powerful stimulus. So if anyone is a fan of flywheel training or has read all the research on flywheel training, that's actually tapping into the exact same principle.
Yeah, cool, man. Awesome. Would you do that with Nordics then? Would you, when someone is strong enough, then would you like let them just fall and try and catch themselves?
I would. I haven't worked with an athlete who's that strong. Yeah. But definitely, I use it on hip hinges, RDLs.
Yeah.
And then also like other knee flexion things, like even just like a fast hamstring curl on a machine, or like the straight leg hip thrust, or kind of like those variations where you're doing like a bridge of some sort, and then getting some hamstring work that way. You can get those moving up and down fast, or you can jump off of the box and catch yourself. Like do it rhythmically like that, and you can create that same situation with the momentum. So there's different ways to do it.
Again, mentioning Kier here, I think he had a webinar on his thing before. They were doing like kettlebell swings with athletes, and at the top the coach was like pushing the kettlebell back down as fast as they could. Athlete, stuff like
makes
that.
Sense.
So question on oscillatory work. I don't know how big a fan you are, if you use it at all, but then you think a lot of the benefit that is coming from oscillatory isometrics and stuff like that actually is just that like eccentric portion, which I'm actually, for the first time, I'm actually loading fast and I'm trying to change direction quickly. Or that's where I'm starting to think of where the actual benefit from these oscillations is.
I would gravitate toward that being the benefit. But I'm also biased, so and I don't use them because I want to do more of a complete lowering. So I want to come all the way up and then get more of the momentum if that's the approach I'm trying to take. So I don't personally use them. But I would also say, I mean, your basic, like just your isometric has also proven like to be effective for some purposes, like just getting stronger, or a little like structural development. So in that sense, I would say eccentric overload, or the momentum-based loading, it's obviously not the only thing that works. It's just a very powerful tool. But since isometrics, people have done split squat isometrics daily and found themselves jumping higher after that. If that works, then maybe an oscillatory isometric also works for some reason other than the fast movement,
I think really in the rehab process, it's something that's probably not done, which is that faster loading should be done more, that faster loading and that faster change of direction, and you're making use of momentum.
It definitely isn't the beginning of rehab though. That's it's towards because we're intentionally creating high forces. So if you're rehabbing, you got to start gentle, start low force. But you want to try to get there.
I wonder then, is that like in them, what's the difference here between then, I'm just trying to think out loud here. So what I do sometimes with it, like again, a knee athlete, is like load up the trap bar pretty heavy and they're just standing in it, and they just do like a little like a snap down, except they don't care if they do it go into a hinge, like, but they just land on a single leg in that position. Is there, and I usually get them to like try and stick that landing on a single leg with the trap bar in their hand. Is there a case to be made for not just getting them to stick it? Like, so just, okay, come straight back up, versus just actually stick that landing in the isometric there? Or am I splitting hairs?
Yeah, I think, and I wish I had the citation on hand, but I think you do get a little bit different muscle tendon complex mechanics there, where when you're sticking the landing, the muscle is going to yield more. Whereas if you're trying to reverse it, the muscles are going to stiffen and the tendon is going to lengthen and then snap back. So there are some, I think, it is a different stimulus, and a different, some different mechanics happening there. I wouldn't view that as a reason not to do one. You know, and I also think you still are getting, if the landing is challenging, then you're still getting that momentum based loading on the muscle. So it's, that's still good. But yeah, I think there is a difference there. And I think you do, again, maybe the landing is a precursor, right? You want to get to, if we are talking about rehab, you want to get to the rebound. But I don't know if there's that, like, I wouldn't say there's ever a reason to stop doing just the landing, you know?
No, like it's something I had in, like, I did a knee pain webinar for people just a knee rehab webinar a couple of years ago during COVID when it started, and I had them trap bar drops in it and we were just sticking the landing. And I was talking more about like just co-contractions and stuff, and not just not sinking further into the knee when you're able to stop that weight, stop it. But maybe now, maybe when I think back, maybe some of the benefit is just actually, maybe the concentric movement could be part of it, and actually part of that benefit as well, rather than just sticking the landing. Anyway, that's just me thinking out loud.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about specificity then? Because I'm going to guess that like some of your thoughts around this are, and you mentioned a little bit earlier, where specificity is the sport itself or whatever you're doing, and then it looks to me like your training is quite unspecific with your athletes then, where you're just building general strength. Would I be correct in saying that? And secondly, what's your thought process behind that?
Right. So yeah, first of all, that is largely correct. And so yeah, the idea is, you know, we get specific ability from your sport, from the athletic activities you're trying to train. And then when it comes to strength training, you're really just trying to get general strength. And the combination of those two things is what produces, you know, great performance. So that's kind of a theory. And then the question is, well, what happens in practice? And from my, 13 years training people now, my experience has been, when the specific side is in place, meaning somebody has a good, let's just say if we're talking about jumping, a good jumping background, maybe jumping and sport play, you know, like they have a good athletic background and they've jumped a good amount, and they have good jumping coordination. When those things are in place, then general strength tends to transfer very well. And then even again, you know, as I've gotten into the speed realm of the past probably 8 to 10 years, somebody who's, you know, they've been a track athlete, they've played maybe other field sports, or maybe even like some basketball too, whatever. They have a good athletic background, they're a track athlete, all these things are in place, all these specific things are in place, even with the gap between deep squatting and sprinting. You know, I mean, we're like two opposite ends of a spectrum here. Deep squat can still translate to sprinting quite well. You know, I've seen it happen. And so you have this concern of, okay, I mean, yeah, deep range strength training is very, very different from sprinting. It's a very different stimulus. And yet when we have, again, your whole life has been about specific ability, and you add in once a week deep squatting, and then maybe another day is a split squat, or maybe another day is a box squat or something. When you add in just a small, reasonable amount of general strength training, it translates quite well. Typically, it's not a big issue of, oh man, we squatted for a month and now we got slow. It's not really an issue.
Yeah.
Now so I would say that's the scenario you want, right? Where you don't have to think about specificity. And I would say, yeah, a lot of athletes have that. A lot of good athletes, I would say, don't have to think about that as much. And this is all the evidence, again, for the conjugate method, the West Side Barbell. Like, oh, look, we took our powerlifting scheme and we had just applied it to a football player, and his 40-yard dash got faster and all this. It's the testimonial, right? And so that is a scenario that exists, and that's what we hope for, is we just train general strength and everything gets better. Simple thing, simple process. So that exists, and I think we need to acknowledge that it exists. However, other scenarios also exist. So if you don't have maybe some of the talent, and maybe you don't have some of the background in the thing you're trying to develop, then that general strength tends to not transfer as well. So like in my world, I'll get the 25, 30, 35-year-old guy who decides he wants to jump higher. And he doesn't have the background. Maybe played a sport of some sort, but maybe wasn't spectacular at it. Without the genetic talent, maybe didn't jump as much, right? Like if you're not good at jumping, you don't go out and play basketball the way that what's his name, Zion plays. you play the game differently, so you don't jump as much while playing.
Yeah.
You probably don't go on a dunk journey if you don't think you have the talent, and it just doesn't, you're not any good at it. You don't go on that dunk journey. You never develop that history of jumping. Now those specific abilities aren't really present. So then you could easily add 50 pounds to your squat and not jump any higher in that context. But so it's not really a problem with the squat. It's an issue of, there's other things not in place.
Yeah. The coordinative aspects of the skill itself are not there.
Right. Coordinative aspects, maybe. And
the quality.
Yeah, just rate of force development, the elasticity, all these things might not be there.
Yeah.
So then it's actually, in my opinion, it's that athlete who needs to be more concerned about specificity.
Yeah.
And think, okay, well, if I jump once per week and I squat twice per week, and I just sort of, I'm trying to complement jumping with sprinting, with jumping with squatting, but I don't really have the massive background of jumping, then, I'm kind of just pulling myself in two different directions, and it's just can equate to not a whole lot of spectacular results. Like maybe that's the person who needs to be more specific, who needs to just jump a lot, but that's tough because you have a 25-year-old or whatever who starts jumping a lot. I mean, it's just waiting for knee pain to happen, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm getting a little off track here, or just kind of getting lost here, but
that's okay.
Yeah, there's all these different scenarios that can happen. Yeah. And I think, we need to acknowledge specificity and, the differences between a certain type of strength training and athleticism. But yeah, there's a lot of cases where it really works well anyway, despite those differences.
It's easy to get lost in this topic. I was asked this question for our membership site, and like such a hard thing to even frame when I started talking about specificity. So I just wrote this down. So I kind of had a classification. I tried to figure it out a little bit, just sat down for 2 minutes. And the classification that I kind of came out with was for those guys was like the sport itself, obviously, is the most specific thing. Then something that looks like the sport. So not playing basketball, but just jumping and running and things like this. Yep, then I had like the attractors, which is something that Franz Bosch talks a little bit, other people talk about as well, which is like the hip lock and stuff like this. Then I had like maybe the muscle activity. So like if the argument is, okay, the hamstrings are maybe behaving isometrically when I go and sprint, then maybe in the gym I can train isometric hamstring strength. And then from there, I kind of went to specific joint angles, which I don't think are particularly important to train in the gym. Only really if you're pairing it with the specific muscle activity, then maybe I think it can be helpful. What's your stance on like training the attractors then?
Yeah, so that's where I would say I'm very skeptical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, yeah, okay, we found out on the jump takeoff that the muscles largely act isometrically because they stiffen right away. Therefore, let's go isometric in the gym. I'm not sold on that. And it's basically just this idea of if you're trying to be specific, you can't be any more specific than the sport. And so, you know, it's tough to talk about because the body is so complex and there's so many factors that go into it. But it's like if we're doing a strength exercise, whatever about it is specific can't possibly be developed by that more than it already is by the sport.
Yeah.
The only way it can work is if there's something general, something transferable.
Yeah.
Now, that's just a theory, but I think it actually shows up. I mean, people aren't really exploring that exact thing in research, so it's tough, but it does actually show up in some evidence. I mean, you have the case of you know, a group of people do a set of or a training program on quarter squats and improve their quarter squats by like 40% and don't jump any higher. And it's like, okay, so what, you know, what happened to the joint angle specificity value, you know? And so
I'll give you Bosch's answer for that.
Yeah.
No, I can't speak for him, but what I would expect he would say is it's to do with muscle slack. So they're actually using weight, using load, external load to help them overcome muscle slack. And then when you take away that barbell, he would say they're worse at overcoming muscle slack than when they go and try and jump.
Interesting.
Yeah, I expect that would be. So if you see his, he talks about velocity-based training in all the studies, and he says that rate of force development, all the studies are done measuring external load, and their rate of force development improves using external load. And he says that that's not something that you should be measuring. Like if you want to see improvements, you need to see it without external load.
Sure, yeah.
You know, so,
I mean, I like that thought. Yeah, that opens a whole can of worms as far as like interpreting physics outputs in research. You know, like the thing that comes to mind is barbell deadlift versus hex bar deadlift. Hex bar has higher forces. Does that mean it's a better exercise? No, not in my opinion. Now, it might be a better exercise for some people for some reason, but it's not because of the force. Because strength exercises are not about ground force. You know, that's not the objective of a strength exercise. It's, you know, you're trying to get muscular force. And the whole idea with strength exercises, you put yourself in a weak position so that you have to generate a lot of muscular force to get out of it. But when you put yourself in a weak position, your ground forces are going to be low.
Yeah.
That's like the whole idea of strength training. I mean, if we could take a rack pull higher and higher, the forces are going to keep going higher because you're putting yourself in a stronger position. That doesn't make it a better exercise.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually like that thought by him, as far as, okay, if we improve maybe it's a explosive pull of some sort, we improve our RFD on that. How meaningful is that for sprinting or jumping? So I like that thought.
For me, Bosch has a lot of good thoughts on like how you actually measure transfer of training and all of that conversation. I think he has a lot of good thoughts. And then I think people don't go into that and look at it because they don't agree with some of the practical aspects of how he trains athletes.
Sure,
but
yeah.
I think, which I like, I don't agree with some of that as well, how he does it, but I do appreciate he's trying to solve the problem of transfer of training, and it's a very hard problem to solve. I appreciate like that and his training theory, and he's trying to figure out what's actually happening at the muscles when we sprint and the tendons and stuff. And I really do appreciate that. And I think people should look at not all of his work. Don't take it as gospel, but like people will stay away from it because they see a Bosch clean and they don't like it. So you can separate two ideas, I think.
Yeah. Can I talk a little bit more about the specificity thing?
Yeah, please.
So one of the points that I didn't quite get to was, the scenario where you develop general strength and it works for a while and then it stops working. And, or maybe it, and when I say stops working, I mean, the thing that I think you tend to see is, okay, this person was jumping higher off an approach, they were sprinting faster, they were hopping and bounding farther, like everything was getting better. And now those things are changing, or maybe they're stopping and maybe they're getting a little bit worse, but our standing vertical is still going up, broad jump still going up, power clean still going up. So we're getting better at some explosive things, but we're getting better at slower explosive things, So we're still getting transfer somewhere, but it's not showing up where we really want it. In that situation, another strategy. Okay, so one that I've talked about is, like not lifting or dramatically reducing it. I think another piece of that though is moving in the more specific direction with your strength training. But what I call that is you're being less disruptive. In other words, you are not, okay, we're moving from a deep squat to a 90-degree angle squat, not because I want to train specific 90-degree joint angle strength, but just because it's going to be less disruptive because we're not lengthening the muscles out as far. So it's more about the removal of a stimulus while still trying to maintain some strength than it is about we're getting that value from the specificity.
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing when it comes to the contraction mode. So maybe we switched over from, we were doing deep hip hinges and let's say seated hamstring curls. So we're doing our hip extension and knee flexion at long muscle length. Now we switch over to the straight leg hip thrust, and maybe we do it as an isometric, not because I think that the isometric component is going to transfer to sprinting so much, but it is going to be less disruptive. Yeah. It's a more similar stimulus. So we're removing the extremely different stimulus, and that might help us adapt in the more specific direction. It's not that I don't use any of those type of like strategies. It's just how I view it.
Yeah.
I would say, let's say we have a young athlete who hasn't strength trained much, and then they start doing, let's say they're a track athlete, so they're training speed, and they start doing a straight leg hip thrust iso, so like the Alex Natera hip iso. Is that going to have much of a performance benefit for them? I would say only if it makes them generally stronger.
Yeah.
Which, because if they're an untrained athlete, maybe it can. maybe it doesn't require much to make them stronger. But it's not that potent of a stimulus for general strength. So like long term, I'm not expecting that exercise to do a whole lot for them, even though it's highly transferable. Because I'm not really buying that specific strength carry over to sprinting narrative. It's more like, okay, after we get the hamstrings strong with RDLs and hamstring curls, now we do this just to not lose strength and stop messing with our speed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just viewing it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think Alex Natera would disagree with that, actually. I would say,
general strength first.
I would say so. And I would say that some of the reason that he uses that work, and some of the reason that I do like some of that work, that isometric work and the overcoming isometrics, the pushes and stuff, is for certain athletes who strength training, like in season, seems to beat them up. Their body just feels like shit. And I just think, actually, okay, here you can do some isometrics, you can push really hard, like you're getting that nervous system stimulus, but you're not getting the negative effects along with it. So that's where I would start to see some of that work becoming very, very valuable for. I use that with some like GA players and stuff. Just if they squat, if they do any type of squat, any type of deeper squat, their back feels like shit after it. And
sure, yeah.
It's not worth me trying to clean it up like that week. All right, here's how you actually squat better. It's just like, no, just take it out for you have a game this weekend.
Yeah, and that's the fatigue and just the recovery. That's a whole different layer to this conversation. As far as maybe we do things that are more specific, but maybe we're doing them just because they're less fatiguing at times. Yeah.
And then the only other thing I would say on the specificity stuff is like some of the attractors and stuff that Bosch talks about. I think, just this is more for people listening, I suppose, but I think it can be sometimes valuable to think of that work in the rehab process when someone can't run and when they can't jump. And that's where you will see me using some of those things. Now, whether it's about, again, like being specific to that, or whether it's just exposing themselves like to those positions and getting some of those feelings that they might get in the sport, it's probably just more, as much as anything, just building confidence and feeling like, that position kind of feels like this other position that I'll be in a month's time when I'm back playing. So I think in the rehab process, specificity maybe in the gym maybe has a little bit more room to play, but you still got to build the strength.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like if you can't do the thing that you want to do, maybe you do something that's sort of like it, but just it fits your stage at that time. Yep. Yeah,
exactly. That's where I think it's nearly the opposite of what Bosch thinks. To be honest, I'd love to get Bosch on. I'd love to try and get him, but I don't think he would. But the opposite of what he thinks, I think, is like when the better an athlete is, the more specific they need to be in their gym work. And I'm probably the exact opposite to that.
Yep. I would agree. It's again, that's part of the narrative, like general strength as a beginner, and then you have to get more advanced. And that's another part of that I've tried to try to push back on.
Yeah.
One, because untrained athletes can get better easily, or they can get stronger more easily. So you can actually do some, more specific or less disruptive strength training and get dramatic results from that. You get teenage males get on a plyometric program and they could increase their max squat by 100 pounds, they're just more trainable from a lesser stimulus. So it's actually a good idea to use sort of that, not the extreme general end of the spectrum. Because if you can get the general from something easy and fun, then that's actually makes more sense. Yeah, or like jump squats. You take untrained athletes in research and put them on jump squats. It's like, oh, their power increased by 40% in 6 weeks. It's like, it's dramatic.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you take somebody who's been squatting for 10 years and they do jump squats, like probably not gonna, do much for them if they've already been, playing a sport, doing plyos and squatting for years.
Yeah.
Jump squats are sort of an insignificant stimulus for them, probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the advanced athletes that have to go further down that extreme general side in order to keep making changes.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, brother. If you have any other thoughts, now is your chance. Or if you want to just let people know where they can find you and check you out, then you can do that.
Yeah, I think I'll shut it down here. But a lot of talking. I'm not a talkative guy, so yeah, jump.science and then speed.science0 on Instagram. Those are my 2 accounts.
Why is the 0 there? Did someone else have speed?
Somebody else, yeah, man. Somebody else has it, and it's not even like a speed training thing, or I don't remember. It's like just a random person. Oh, and way back when jump science when I first got on Instagram, I had to do jump_science, because jump science was some parent posting their 2 little kids on a trampoline. So I couldn't get that username. Yeah. They hadn't been on Instagram in years, but I couldn't get it. So I had to go jump_. Jump.science is better though. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Okay. I really appreciate you coming on, Daniel. I appreciate all the stuff that you do. I think that people should definitely go and check out your Instagram. I think Tim called you a training terminator, and there's some really good stuff there. So definitely worth checking out.
Right, yeah, it's been fun talking to you, man.